Hey everybody, good day. It's 12 o'clock. I think we have got an echo in here actually. Let me see if I can open this door. 1 second. We've got various people knocking around outside, so forgive the background noise, but welcome everybody. See, we've got Kirk here and we've got Steve on. We'll give everybody a couple of minutes to get to jump on here. We've got Chris. Man, I tell you, what time is it with you, Chris? I guess that's early morning in Australia again. But thank you everybody for joining. We'll just give everybody a couple of minutes to join. In the usual manner, if you could just please chat away, press the chat button. We'd like to try and make this as interactive as possible. So please just put an R in there if you're a regular, or F if you're a first timer, and also where you're coming in from. I'll just give people a couple of minutes to jump in. Emma, if you could just turn your sound down just slightly, that would be great. So I think we're going to have a small quality attendees today. We haven't done the usual kind of blasting on LinkedIn for this, and it's a very kind of niche thing. So today we're going to be talking about pre-commissioning. I think we'll get off in a minute or two. Okay, Drew, so let's kick it off. Thank you. So again, thank you everybody for joining again. This is number 7 in the series of lunch and learns that we've been doing over the last few weeks, and basically looking at how we can pivot our services to suit the next generation of major projects that are coming through, adding maximum value, getting the risk down to 0, and also cost minimization. So this week, September the 24th, we're looking at pre-commissioning. Next week, we will wrap it all up with a presentation which goes through everything that we've talked about. And then after then, we are looking to create a show in this space. We like this space from 12 till 1 on a Thursday, and something that nobody's doing at the moment, but we plan to have sort of like a vlog, a show, a lunch and learn, all rolled into one with guest speakers. And I think you'll find it very interesting. We're pretty excited about it ourselves. Okay, Drew, thank you. So again, guys, this is all part of the Commissioning on Demand initiative that we've got to try and satisfy the next wave of major projects coming through with cost efficiency, value maximization, and risk management. Okay, Drew. So in the usual manner, we've got a little bit of housekeeping, and then we have a panel today. We're going to have a look at some definitions and concepts, look at the pre-commissioning process, the pre-commissioning examples, and then a little bit of best practice, open it up if anybody's got any experience on pre-commissioning that they would like to share. And then if we've got our expert on pre-commissioning here, which I'm just looking, I don't think he's joined us just yet, but he's got some activities that he'd like to share with Precom cleaning on hydromilling, and then some Q&A and next steps. But by all means, as in the normal way, if we've got some questions, please make a comment, and we'll stop and certainly answer the questions and come in from there. Okay, Drew? So again, we are recording this session. It will be on demand on our website for future. We're going to aim for probably half an hour on this one, 45 minutes tops with questions. Please ask away, any comments, Q&A at the end, but please stop us halfway through. And again, the session will be available on our website. Here's John coming in. Hi, how you doing, John? Good.
Fine, how are you today?
Yeah, very good, thank you. So here we go. We've got Andrew. Andrew's our director for Tracker Technologies. He's in Dallas, and he's got a lot of experience working in the field, turnover coordinator, first-hand knowledge of how pre-commissioning, what it is, what it consists of, the pitfalls, mine of information there. So Andrew's going to take us through a couple of slides. And then we're pleased to have John Gone. He's our SME for Precom cleaning. and he's got a slide there that he just wants to tag on the end, where it's kind of best practice on Precom cleaning now to use hydromilling instead of some traditional approaches. So there's some advantages to share and go through there. So that's the panel for today. So we always start with the definition. It's always good to get on the same page with what we actually mean by pre-commissioning. Now, this is slightly contentious. Depending on who you speak to and depending on what project you're working on, we've all got a different idea of pre-commissioning. This is ours. I'm not saying that this is definitive and it's not one size fits all, but it's good to certainly understand, you know, obviously the two sides of the definition of pre-commissioning. So here we go. Pre-commissioning is an activity that involves the verification of functional operability of elements within a system to achieve a state of readiness for the commissioning and startup operation. So we say that this is a static commissioning, i.e. not energized, no power, just static. Now, I do know that there are some projects that that's the definition of MC, mechanical completion, and pre-commissioning is livened up. So depends on the project, that's all we'll say. But certainly, as far as we're concerned, and I think if you can come in here, Drew, you know, pre-commissioning to us is static.
That's correct. Yeah, it's more along the lines of the installation checks. They're following along with construction, doing basically the QA, QC checks to validate the equipment prior to handover to commissioning and startup.
Yeah. So usually on a project, first things first, in the project execution plan, let's get the definition down. What do we mean by MC? What do we mean by pre-commissioning? What do we mean by commissioning? And let's all get on the same page. That's tip number one. If anybody has got any comments on a different definition or what you do on your projects, by all means, please chat away and we can bring you in on that. But certainly that's our definition. Okay. So again, the concept is basically not energized, it's static, and it's a series of multidiscipline quality control checks. So as Drew's quite rightly saying there, it's a QC function. It's confirming that the equipment as installed is present, correct, working, aligned, and most importantly, it's not just doing the activity, it's writing up. There is a report on file, a QC document on file, and that goes in a specific place that we can verify today, tomorrow, the next day, 3 weeks, that actually that verification was done. So a QC function. And generally, you know, in our terminology, it's all managed and tracked by Tracker Check, which is our completions management system. All that information ends up as a central point in the CMS. Okay, so if you want to take it from here, Drew.
Yeah, will do. And Steve brought up a good question there. He's asking, so would the PC be completed by construction or the commissioning personnel? So that's one thing I'm going to kind of cover in this slide right here. So what we're showing is the process moving from construction through pre-commissioning and over to commissioning. And there's some checkpoints in there, and there's some integration of personnel. So between construction and pre-commissioning, you have an actual system handover or subsystem handover. Walk downs are done, punch lists are created. And then from pre-commissioning and commissioning, same process. You're doing that handover and releasing of authority of that equipment. Now, I'll go through what I've seen good and what I've seen bad, and I'll give you my personal opinion on what should happen, but that's what it is. It's personal opinion just based off of seeing it on different projects. But I think it's interesting to note that depending on the industry you're in, pre-commissioning may or may not exist. From the power side, the utilities, fossil fuels, they don't do pre-commissioning per se. There's no specific group that does it. It's just embedded in the process. So on the power projects I was on, you had construction, you had startup. There was not a pre-commissioning group. We would do the walk downs. We would do the daily walk downs to see where our subsystems were, their percent complete, that type of deal. We'd make notes and then do an official walk down. So the actual installation checks were covered by punch list items. Now, when I went over to oil and gas, that was a bit of a shock. There was a lot more handoff points, and the reason being is the different type of equipment you're operating. So if you're out in the Gulf of Mexico, you don't have any leeway for errors. If something goes wrong, then you have the potential of putting things in the water, and now it's an environmental incident. So there's typically a completely separate group of people that are doing the pre-commissioning. And again, those are the static checks. And we have a slide right after this that'll talk about that, what those checks are. What I've seen is they integrate tightly with the construction group, and they almost help drive the construction group for turnovers. Again, construction is area concerned. They're out there doing area builds. They're not overly concerned with the subsystem portion of it because they get their proficiency and efficiency out of area builds. So the Precom group helps steer them towards the startup turnover. They start making work lists of these items need to be completed for turnover, and they help drive that process and closeouts. So they actually follow closely behind construction, and they're doing the quality check sheets, the quality inspections on like the cable pulls, torque, stuff like that. So I've seen Precom actually be part of the construction group. I've seen them be their own entity, reporting to the different manager, and that manager reports up to the project manager. And then I've seen the last one where they were a different group, but they reported to the commissioning manager and the commissioning group. Of those three, and I've seen multiple instances of them, the ones that went the best were when the pre-commissioning team was part of the startup and commissioning group, and they reported to the commissioning manager. The other instances, just due to human nature, it tended to be a us-them type thing on the site. So there was a conflict between the groups, and it didn't go too well. We did our best to manage that, and you try to get everybody to get along, but there's always, it's just human nature kicking in. Plus with them reporting to different managers, our commissioning manager had no say-so over what the Precom group was doing or what they were turning over. So what ended up happening on that project was we got all the paperwork turned over to us, but we didn't fully trust it. So we went out and redid a lot of the items. So there's a lot of rework involved. The one where the commissioning group was reporting to the commissioning manager, that went so much better. The group sat in the same trailer, they worked together, they trusted each other. And I think that was key. It was the trust. Once you're in the same building, same group, reporting to the same manager, you have that we're on the same team mentality. And if the commissioning group, say the mechanical lead, doesn't like the way something's being turned over, he can definitely influence that, and the Precom group can modify the way they're doing the turnovers, and then everybody's on the same page again, and the turnovers go a lot smoother. So my opinion is that the Precom group should report to the commissioning manager. They can be their own separate entity. I've seen it work better where they're in the same trailer, at least same complex, if possible, and they meet together. It just promotes a team activity instead of this group versus that group.
Good team
projects seem to go better.
But the important point there, Drew, is to, like the definition, identify it up front and put it into the project execution plan. Who's doing what and who's reporting to what. So there's no confusion halfway through.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Got some good comments here. So, Chris is saying, Rio Tinto called it no load commissioning, which kind of goes into there's no load, so there's no power. So that's in line with what we think as well, Drew, eh?
Exactly, yeah.
It took him a long time to get a PC out of his head, yeah. Okay. And then Steve is saying in the past, it's also known as coal commissioning, yeah? Hot and coal commissioning is something we've come across, certainly in the power plant, say, Drew. Coal commissioning, have you come across that?
Not the actual term, but the process. Yeah, you go out and verify. Once you get a subsystem turned over to you, you go do the verification checks, point to point on the cables. You're basically doing everything the Precom team was doing. You just weren't filling out a check sheet for it.
Yeah.
and then you were logging punch items, clearing punch. If there's any outstanding punch items or priority one, then you wouldn't do the startup. So yeah, in concept.
And then PC can be handled by the completions team, which comes under the commissioning team.
Yep, exactly.
And then, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I can see that, Chris. But yeah, okay, the completions team could be the Precom team as well. Thanks for the comments, guys. Great. Okay.
Yeah, and one more nuance to this. So we talked about the physical separation of the groups. They're completely different parties. Now, what we didn't talk about was the actual method of tracking the data. So if you have 3 different groups, construction, pre-com, and com, and they're all operating out of their own data set, whatever that's going to be, if they have their own software, you're now creating the exact same data 3 times. So in the one where the commissioning group and the pre-com group were totally separate, totally different managers, they were using 2 different databases, 2 different softwares. We tried our best to keep them in sync, but it was near impossible. And we had some really talented people on that project, and we were still struggling to keep the data synced. Just the smallest change, drops of things, drops of tags, really hard to keep things synchronized. So on the other project where they were under the same house, we were using the same software. It got rid of so much hassle, so many roadblocks, so many differences in data sets. The review process, the turnover process was so much smoother when you're under the same software house. So even if you're gonna operate 2 different groups, reporting to 2 different managers, I would highly recommend operating out of the same software. One, it reduces data duplication. You don't have 2 different groups duplicating the same data. Plus the handover structure is just so much easier. You're not trying to sync up missing items, figuring out why we have skids, they don't, just all the nuances of 2 different data sets. Really important to note there. All right, so if there's no comments or anything on this slide, I'll move to the next one, Martin.
Sure.
All right, so what are you actually checking? What are some examples of pre-com activities? In my mind, the pre-com group, you're really doing QA, QC checks on construction. They typically have their own people doing it as well, and they may have their own documentation. But a lot of the time it doesn't align with the actual startup and commissioning group's documentation. So if you can get that documentation done in the manner that's going to be stored long-term in the database, you're off to a good start. So what the QA/QC group is doing is they're embedding themselves with construction. You don't necessarily have to have the subsystems turned over to you to be able to do the walkdowns and some of the data collections because it's not energized equipment. It's not pressurized. So you're able to get in there and interact and not get in the way of construction, but follow right behind them. So if they get a panel termed closed out, you can go in behind them and start doing your checks because they're just visual checks a lot of the times. And you're filling that paperwork out and getting it ready. So you can actually, it's not a sequential path. You're actually QC or pre-com or the QC group is overlaid on top of construction. So they're just right behind them in the build process. But some of the things you're going to be checking, cables, your tank and vessel inspections, like your catalyst loading for getting like desiccant loading and whatnot. The cleaning where you're getting into like the hydros, alignment checks, torque verifications, the hydro testing, all of those items are examples. There's millions more, but it's those type of things that you can go out and just visually verify and check that they're installed correctly. They're installed per the design specs. They're not missing items. You can capture early on termination issues, tagging issues, and it just speeds up the process because you're right there with construction. You're not waiting for construction to finish a 2-month period before you find these issues. You're doing it the day after. And it's easier to get them to go back and make changes when they're already working in that area. And again, they do area builds. So these are some of the main items you're checking, but this is a good conversation point. Are there any other key items that you've seen in the past in everybody else's experience that make things better when you check them in pre-com than if you wait for them to get to commissioning or startup. It's kind of a discussion point. Has anybody seen any key items that we don't have listed here that were big time consumption items if they weren't done in pre-com? Hopefully typing furiously. Any comments on this, Martin?
No, I think that's kind of the probably the 80-20. That's probably 80% of what we experience in pre-commissioning. And then, of course, as we've been through, people that have been through the other lunch and learns, the Plan, Do, Check, Act, planning for this. We don't just leave it to chance and call the vendors in and then leave it to them to figure out what to do. We all pre-plan it, and we have the check sheets, Drew.
Right.
So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and the paperwork gathering is actually a large portion of it. In the projects where you don't have a pre-com group, startup is directly working with the construction group for the turnover. So you have to try to get the construction group to put the packages in a sensible manner for you to review and accept them. So it's actually it's a time-consuming process, and it takes a lot of people in the construction group to make that happen. I'm going to say construction's not in love with doing paperwork. It's not their favorite thing. So having a pre-com group whose entire job is quality control, safety checks, and paperwork, it's in their job description. It's easier to get better paperwork coming over from their pre-com group. And if they're embedded with the com group answering the same manager, then the package turnover can be dictated easier. So it smooths out that transition because the data is coming over in the way you need it already. On the power projects where we did not have a pre-com group, I was the go-between, so they would bring over stacks of paper in the best manner they thought possible. I tried to get them to change it. Some would, some wouldn't. But then I spent a couple of days reviewing the paperwork, pulling it apart, attaching it to our paperwork, getting rid of paperwork we didn't need. It just caused a big road bump. So the pre-com group can help with that by tailoring the paperwork coming over and handing over in a methodical method. So it can definitely speed things up.
So you were right in the middle. That's you. That was you in the middle there, Drew. I think that's the key to organization, that all the information in one place so we can retrieve it as and when required.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Exactly. All right, next slide. So here are just a few examples of the pre-com check sheets. We call them A check sheets. I've heard them called multiple things. In the power industry, they may be construction check sheets. But we refer to them as A or B. A is pre-com, B is commissioning or startup. And again, these are mostly just static checks. So here you can see your recording the meg ohms, phase to phase, phase to ground, cable checks, that type of thing, whether they're terminated. So this would be just an example of electrical. And then you got mechanical. We threw two examples here. One's a check sheet for pressure vessels and tanks, just doing the inspection, checking the normal items, design specs to meet criteria. And then the second one's actually a coupling alignment. There's actually 3 pages to this one, but we're only showing 1 page. But that's where you're doing the static checks on the coupling guards, that type of thing, doing your measurements before you actually liven the thing up. And then lastly, you got instrumentation and control. Do you have a comment on that last one, Martin?
Yeah, I'm just saying, so specialist vendors can come in or manufacturers can come in, leave their report with you, but we'd still need our check sheets filling in for the completions management system.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes ours just act as a cover page.
Right.
Typically ours come out with QR codes on them, so it's easy to digest in the database. So there may be some times where you're getting the construction paperwork, especially via cables. Typically, they have pool terms, term A, term B. If you're in oil and gas, they have glanding checks. So you may get a whole stack of paperwork just for one cable. You can handle that by overlaying these check sheets as kind of cover pages, so it physically ties it to the database.
And I guess if you think about one of the key functions of the completions management system is all this is pre-populated in. So it's not left to chance. We know for subsystem and system what A check sheets or certainly Precom check sheets are required. And then it's the coordinator or the turnover coordinator's responsibility to compile them, make sure they're filled in correctly, been checked and approved, and then gone back in, and then you do your status reports on that data. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it is definitely worth the time to compile the construction paperwork and load it against a tag inside the database. A lot of times when you go to turn over to operations or the client, they need you to prove that items have been checked. So if you can just pull it up in the database and actually show the construction paperwork at the click of a button, rather than go digging through 3-ring binders, it gives the client an immediate sense of comfort and relief that you can pull that data up instantaneously, rather than we'll get back to you and then you discover the paperwork's missing or something like that.
Yeah.
It just helps the turnover process go faster when you turn over to the client themselves. And usually they're pretty hard on you the first few subsystems, but if you can prove yourself reliable with the data, they trust you more and more and more, and the turnovers go faster. Yeah, exactly, Chris. The audit trail. Yep.
The all-important audit trail.
Exactly.
Any questions, guys? Fairly straightforward process, often misunderstood, but I think the key thing to it is define it up front. What is your definition on the project for Precom, and then the different groups? Who's going to do what, and have we got all the pre-commissioning check sheets into the CMS, and who's going to coordinate the data out, round, and back in again? That's the simple process in essence.
And if you have any say-so, push for those two groups to operate under the same house using the same software.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's decided years before we can get there in a contract, and you just have to deal with it. But
sure.
All right.
Okay, and if you go into the next one, next slide. So here we go. We've got a case here for hydromilling. So maybe you could take us through this, please. The techniques before. I think the techniques for Precom cleaning, they've been around for a long, long time, and generally they haven't changed much. But just recently, a case for hydromilling's come in. So maybe, John, if you could talk us through this, that would be great.
Sure. We found out by doing different jobs that if you actually do some hydromilling prior to steam blows, you save a lot of time. I've listed up here a lot of the advantages. And, you can do hydromilling while they're still putting the plant together. You can do sections of the pipe. You can lay it up. You can put nitrogen in there to keep it laid up. So when it is time to steam blow, your pipe's basically already clean. So you can cut the time down dramatically. You save a lot of money on D-men because you did cut the time down on steam blows. You have less waste than you would if you tried to chemical clean everything. So and there's a lot of less environmental impact because of what I mentioned as far as the chemical cleaning. So we found out that by doing a lot of hydromilling in advance to steam blows, you save a lot of time. A lot of people don't care for it because I just don't think they're familiar with it. We found out that a lot of other systems, they'll do tap flushing, froth flushing. Hydromilling gets in there and saves time again on doing all of that. And we just really kind of trying to push that the hydromilling is a great step in pre-commissioning.
Okay, thanks, John. Yeah, just, in time is money. So just typically, what, can you quantify the sort of the money saved?
Well, one job we did, they're expecting around 3 million gallons of D-men water. We did it in about 1.2 million gallons of water. So just almost 2 million saving. It's close to $2 million or more in just savings alone. Not counting your storage, your water making, the removal of the water from waste. So, I mean, it saved the client a lot of money, and it saved them a lot of time too, which also adds up to money for the client.
Anybody else got any kind of comments on that? But, certainly from in this age of environmental impacts, the waste management, very timely, very costly. So this eliminates that essentially, John.
I agree. And one thing, schedules really never change. Startup always gets pushed at the end because constructions took a little bit longer. I mean, that's just pretty common anymore.
Yeah.
This helps the startup manager kind of regain some of the schedule that he lost, not to his fault. So that also helps startup manager out a lot.
Right. So the secret to this is really planning your pre-commissioning cleaning. Again, up front, there's a common theme here. It's all plan, do, check, act. It's all planning, proper planning.
Correct.
And if you build that in, as Lou said to us last week on the Lunch and Learn, he likes to get in there early, walk the course, get boots on the ground, find out what you can do, what you can't do, and build that into the execution plan. So,
and we talked about last week and this week, Drew brought it up too, trust. So the client sees you're trying to really help them and get things done and clean everything up. You get that trust factor being built, which helps the whole team out.
Nice. Good. Any comments, anybody? Any questions? I think we're more or less coming to the end of the slides. Okay. So again, this is all part of the Commission on Demand, which is, you know, we're very keen to explore anything that really impacts those three items there: cost efficiency, value maximization, and risk management. If anybody's got any comments on that, not just now, but by all means, please reach out to us, and we're keen to build them into our products and services, and not just ours, but just to raise the overall awareness of what we can do in the commissioning and startup fraternity to make sure that the next wave of projects that are going to go through are cost efficient, you know, and we do provide maximum value to the client at the end of the day. Okay. Okay, Drew. Here we go. So a quick recap, you know, it's quite a niche subject, and I think we've covered it pretty well. We've got the high points, which is really all about being proactive. So definitions, all get on the same page before the project kicks off, not halfway through and we're all fighting with construction and who's doing pre-commissioning. And so definition is key. Getting the definitions all agreed, get everybody together, even before we have our war room meetings in the morning. First meeting is, okay, definitions. Let's define what we mean by Precom and specify responsibilities. Who's going to do what? Who's going to coordinate all the specialist vendors coming in? Who's going to do the Precom cleaning? What techniques are we going to do? All that upfront work, it saves a colossal amount of work at the back end. We looked at the concept. Basically, there's two different types. Our type is no load, non-energized. And we looked at the activities. We had an example there. Thank you, John, from the pre-commissioning cleaning point of view. For best practice, a case for hydromilling. Yep. So if there's any questions, please fire away. If not, we'll press on. Next week, as you know, we're wrapping up this particular series 1, as we say. We'll do a recap of everything, and that'll be one to kind of summarize everything that we've gone through over the last two months. Would you believe 8 weeks? And then we'll be moving into the new format from there. Okay, Drew. Now, again, very important next week, a very important date coming up, the 2nd of October. It's the Commissioning Professional Society event of the year, would you believe? It's the symposium. We're having a virtual symposium this year. It's normally live in person, but this year it's virtual. And we've got members and attendees from, I think over, I've heard two numbers. One is 26 countries and the other's kind of 30. So we've got a really good representation from the globe, from the commissioning professionals all over the globe. So if this is a format that you enjoy, please go to the website. Emma's put it very kindly at the bottom there. Take a look at what we've got, spread the word. What we're trying to do is we're trying to harness and create a community of commissioning people throughout the world. And on the day, of course, there's going to be a series of lectures, very topical lectures from people that are best in class in their profession. and they're spreading their wisdom. So that's going to be very interesting to listen to. But not only that, we've got an exhibitors hall where we've got some virtual exhibitors there from commissioning support companies that you can go on there. You have a virtual grab bag or briefcase, and you can gather PDFs and videos from those companies. You can arrange to meet them face to face over Zoom and talk to them. So we've got some really good exhibitors down there. And then, of course, we've got Emma in the membership area, and she can go over all the benefits of what membership of the society is going to be, which is essentially, being a part of something special, I would say, for commissioning people. It's a home for commissioning personnel, and there's all sorts of benefits that we've got outlined there, including a grading system and accreditation system for commissioning personnel. So pretty interesting stuff. We're very excited about the prospects. So again, that is the 2nd of October. If that's something that you'd be interested in, please go along to the website and have a look. Be great to see you there on the day. And yeah, that's the social event of the year. It normally is a great social event, but we'll try and do it as social as possible in the virtual environment. Okay, Drew? So again, this is just coming up to 40 minutes now, which is great. We really, really thank you. Thanks for your participation in this. Much, much appreciated. And just conscious of people's time, so time to wash up. And please look for our next session next week, where we will be wrapping everything up into one concise presentation about what Commissioning on Demand means for the new project, new major projects that are coming through. And thank you to the panel. Thanks, John. Thanks, Andrew, for your comments and your content today. And we wish everybody a safe and productive week. Thanks very much, guys. Much appreciated. Thanks, Chris. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for coming in. And thanks, Corin. All the best, guys. Bye for now.
All right. Bye, Martin.
Thanks, Drew.